Ready?
Yep, ready.
2, 1, go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Quality Talks. And today we are bringing the very first online meetup, finally. I was expecting for this moment a long time now, and I'm very happy and I'm very honored that we have such a special guest today. We have Melissa Benua from the United States, right?
Yeah.
She's a DevSecOps enthusiast. She has tons of experience in different parts of IT, which is like backend engineering, quality specialist as well. And it's a huge, huge pleasure to have her today presenting about DevSecOps. So welcome, Melissa, and maybe you can present quickly yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning from the U.S. West Coast, and good evening, I'm going to guess, to the rest of you. So my name is Melissa Benua. I am the Director of Engineering for a startup called mParticle, and I do a lot of things. But one of the most important things I do, one of the things I'm most passionate about, is what we're going to talk about today, which is our DevSecOps strategy, aka how do we get code out the door quickly and safely that makes our customers happy? Because that's really what we're here for, right? That's why we have jobs in IT as software professionals, is to give software to customers that makes them happy. It makes them want to give us more money. That's it, right? That's the job. And so over the course of my career, I started as an SDET, and then I was a backend engineer, and then I was both, and then I was now I'm management. Now I'm in engineering leadership. Everything that I have done has emphasized to me the importance of getting code out the door quickly and safely. So hopefully that's what we're going to talk about here today. I've got a few slides for you, and then I would be delighted to answer questions and just kind of have a conversation about what does it mean to do those things? More specifically, right? What is the art of DevSecOps? Why is it important? And how can we make it work? Sound good?
Yeah, sounds awesome. Let's go.
All right, so let's jump in. So we've got too many buttons over here on my computer. 1 second. Here we are. So let's start with DevSecOps, because you may know the pieces individually, right? You may have heard about DevSecOps, but most people don't talk about DevSecOps because it's a big mouthful. So what is DevSecOps exactly? It's about embedding security into your continuous integration and delivery efforts as a first-party citizen. Some people call it shifting left on security, right? Moving security earlier into the development pipeline. It's about automating as much of your security strategy as possible and making sure that security comes first. Security is just as important as your Kubernetes cluster strategy, as your scaling strategy, as making sure your code compiles. Security is just as important as all of those things, which is fine. And so if we say that, then what is DevTestOps? It's pretty similar. Right, so DevTestOps is embedding testing into your continuous integration and delivery efforts, and shifting left on quality and testing, automating as much of your testing strategy as possible, and creating testing as a first-party citizen in your DevOps effort. Pretty similar, right? They're very intrinsically related. You can't have you really shouldn't have to even say DevTestSecOps, because it should all be implicit in DevOps. The reality is that often it isn't, right? Often we say DevOps and people immediately jump to Docker. And they immediately jump to, your scaling strategy. They immediately jump to Kubernetes. They don't think about all the pieces that are also essential to any successful DevOps strategy, which is making sure the code is high quality, making sure the code is safe, making sure the code does what we want it to do. So when I say DevTestSecOps, what I mean is the original definition of DevOps without the laser focus that we've come to think about it. Right? Security, we have to have security, and we have to have automated security and automated testing as a part of any DevOps strategy. They both need to be a part of the actual continuous integration pipeline, and they both need to have an automation-first approach to delivering the code as quickly as possible. That doesn't mean it's only automation, right? Of course, there's a place for manual testing. Of course, there's a place for exploratory testing. Of course, there's a place for having an in-person security review and doing vulnerability, manually pen testing. Of course, there's places for those, but you can't have every single change you're making, whether outside of, regardless of scope or scale. You can't do that manual step on every single change. It won't scale. If you're doing dozens, excuse me, if you're doing dozens to hundreds of changes a day, it's just not enough physical man hours to do all of those things by hand. You need to have some automation that moves both much faster and is much, much cheaper, right? Machine time is always cheaper than a human's time. You need to have both of those things in order to make sure that you're delivering code as safely and quickly as possible. So with that said, I'm not going to dive too much into what kind of what kind of quality testing we can automate, because hopefully we're all pretty familiar with unit tests and integration tests and doing your API testing, your visual UI testing, et cetera, et cetera. Which I'm happy to talk about a little later if people have questions or want to dive into it. But what I really want to introduce here is what kind of security testing we can automate. So we have basically really two stages we can do testing at, which is true of any type of testing, security or not. You have stuff that can be done at build time, and you have stuff that can be done at runtime that needs deployed code. At build time, you can absolutely do static analysis, right? This is pretty typical. Most languages support that natively, whether that's using compiler warnings or linting or what have you. There's general static analysis, and then there's also simple security static analysis, which runs pretty quickly and looks for things like, whoopsies, you hard-coded password into your code, or you embedded these keys under a variable named key. That's bad, don't do it. You have static analysis will also catch things like you didn't sanitize your input before you made a call directly to the database. So somebody's going to drop tables on you. At build time, you can also do vulnerable dependency analysis, which is things like the SolarWinds hack, to look for things like you're using a version of your HTTP client that comes from your package manager, comes from embedded with the language, but it's got a known exploitable vulnerability in it. So you can do vulnerable dependency analysis, whether that's through GitHub or some third-party providers. There's a lot of places that will do that for you. And again, so that oh, whoops, I need to move off of version 4.2.0. It's got an exploitable vulnerability in it, so I can move to 4.3.0. And again, that'll tell you at compile time. It's very fast, very easy. You can also do in-depth vulnerability scans, which look for chains of code that lead to an exploit. Where static analysis just it's like a very, very fancy regex. In-depth vulnerability analysis is, think of it as a very fancy regex of several pieces going down into your code across a bunch of different files. Those generally take longer, but they can still be built into a CI pipeline. They don't need any running code. Whereas if we think about runtime, right, what can we check once we have the code deployed and running somewhere, whether that's a PR running somewhere, whether that you have to wait till it's in the development or even if it's in production, it's better you catch it than somebody else does. You can do simple things like port scans. Something is, a port is open that shouldn't be. You can do fuzz testing. I have a whole talk you can find on YouTube just about the fun of fuzz testing. Where you can send a bunch of crazy inputs to your application and see what comes out, right? See what strange behaviors you have, see what your observability pops up about. I think that I should have handled this input correctly, but whoops, my application crashed, or whoops, I got the wrong status code back than what I should have gotten. Something interesting happened. Likewise, you can do some dynamic application security analysis, things like Burp Suite, looking for aberrant behaviors that, again, could potentially lead to exploits. There's plenty more than this, but these are sort of my big 3 each categories of things that are pretty low-hanging fruit, pretty well established, and all of them can be built into the development cycle, which looks a little bit, like this. Okay, so if we're talking about a development cycle, that's pretty standard across any continuous integration and delivery implementation, no matter the details of what you're doing, it looks something like this, right? You start by figuring out what change needs to be made. You write your code and you write your tests. You request a review, which includes an automated system that does your build time. So it does your build checks, compile, unit test, static analysis, etc., vulnerable dependency scan, etc. And then you can deploy that change in some way so that you can do your runtime checks, whether that's integration testing, API testing, whatever, right? If you're going to run your Fuzz test run, you would do it then. That change would get merged, gets landed into your mainline branch for deployment. Then it would go out to production where you can monitor and then begin again. This is a pretty standard development cycle. So if we're talking about security testing, right? These are the specific places that matter. Step 2, when you're writing the code, because you need to be aware of the code you're writing, you need to figure out what tests you need to write, and then what additional checks you're going to need, especially to lead into part 3. So, and ideally, you would have not just your automated checks that run, but also an automated set of blame or whatever you want to call it in Git that can tell you, oh, this code is in a high impact area. We need additional security eyes on it, right? To tell you, oh, whoops, you're making a change to our core authentication library. You need to get security involved, no matter how simple you think the change is. Because there's intrinsically always some changes are riskier than others. So you want some way of saying, yes, this change is risky. We're going to run all of our automated checks. And then also we need to get a human as a part of that step 3 for requesting a peer review. So it's basically a 2-step process, right? The first step involves doing all of your build time stuff. Your second step involves doing all your runtime stuff. And so these are where you would drop in any of your security or quality testing pieces. So with that sort of groundwork laid, I kind of wanted to spend time answering questions. I'm sure that there are some interesting topic areas that you all will want to discuss. And I know I have Angela here to help me field some questions as well.
I would love to start if you allow me.
Absolutely.
So to be honest, I'm pretty new to. Oh, we have Angela joining. Awesome. Yeah. Maybe then you can stop sharing and we can just chat. I don't know.
There we go.
Hello.
Well, I have a little sneaky person here as well. Home life.
That's part of the remote meetups. So welcome, Angela, first of all.
Hi, thanks.
It's awesome to see you also here.
Good to be here.
We already had a sneak peek about DevSecOps from Lisa, but I would like to ask a question, and I know it's a very broad question, but DevSecOps is becoming really, really trendy, and I completely agree that in the DevOps part, the security should be already there, but in most of the cases, it is not. So what could we analyze, or how we can begin building or implementing the security layer in our projects? What are the focus points or main questions that we need to make in order to start developing a strategy for that?
But Angela will have definitely, so I talked about that. Yeah, I prefer to start simple, right, with what you already have in place. So you probably have something, right? If you're linting, you have some static analysis going on. And so it may be the simplest thing there to say, I already have a method of linting. I already report linting in my pull request, but I should probably look and see if there's security rules we should be checking. If my linter has some additional areas, or if we've or maybe we're even using some security rules, but nobody's analyzed to see if they're the right ones for us, or if they meet the standard. Likewise, if you're in the cloud, your cloud provider may provide, vulnerable container scans for you. I know AWS does. It may be a matter of flicking it on. So I would look and see, what do you have right now that you're actually maybe partially doing and just not taking full advantage of. And once you have once you have those really low-hanging fruit out of the way, you can look into building a more comprehensive strategy of what are we missing? What's not here? What do you think, Angela?
Yeah, and I think coming from, because my background's a lot different than Melissa's, so I didn't have the development history of work that she does, but coming in as somebody who's strictly cybersecurity, who understands the importance of DevSecOps, I think I don't know what your role may be on your team, but depending on your role, right, starting to have those conversations with security, or if you don't already have a security person on your team that's a dedicated security person, to kind of have those conversations about how you can start to work on implementing things, and don't like I know when I have conversations about it, people are like, well, we don't have time to do that right now. Like, obviously you wouldn't stop everything you're doing right this second and start doing it differently. It would take time to start integrating the thought process of building security in at the beginning. That way it doesn't make it so tedious and having to go back and change everything that you've already done, right? Obviously, it would be great if we all had time to go back and fix and put in security into everything that exists. And I know we're working on it, but starting to do that and moving forward, I think, is the best way to look at it.
Oh, okay, awesome. Thank you. Actually, that comes really related to one question, one of the questions that I received previously on the Meetup, and people asked me to ask you. So, from your experience, can a company have a really good SRE or DevOps team that can implement the security layer, or it would be preferable if we would have a dedicated security team that focus only on the security strategy?
I don't think it works both ways.
I was going to say, I don't think either one is better or worse. I think it's just different, right?
Okay. It's just different. So it depends on exactly how security focused your SRE team is. Especially, you can get away with it if you have somebody who's an SRE, but they're a big security nerd. They may not have the job title, but they're really into it. I've seen that work. They get, good enough is good enough. I've seen it be good enough. On the flip side, I've seen dedicated security teams who have great ideas, but because they have no insight or control of the dev teams, they have almost no traction, right? Sort of like what Angela was saying, is they have great ideas that they want to get implemented, but they have no traction to get any of them done. So it's going to end up where they just do a lot of PRs, and that's not right. That's not an impactful way to do security. If all you're doing is trying to catch stuff at PR time, and you're, A, not writing code so the code base is weird to you, and B, you're being brought in at the last possible second, there's no way for you to have a positive impact there.
And Melissa, do you think it depends on budget and team size and things like that?
It does. It depends on budget, team size, and probably the security savviness of your engineering leadership. Because a lot of that attitude is going to come down to, A, the budgeting, and B, the development, the SDLC that leadership is pushing for the rest of the engineering org. It can come from the ground up, but you have to get buy-in at some point from somebody who's going to put some dollars behind it, right? Who's going to put the headcount behind it, who's going to buy the tool, who's going to give you time to implement against the tool.
Yeah, and Mill, is it Mill? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That was the problem with the setup. I'm sorry, my name is Lena.
Hi, Lena.
Hello.
I was like, interesting. Okay, so Lena, I think it also is going to depend on what the team wants to do, right? I mean, because I'm not into like forcing people to necessarily learn things that they're not interested in learning, even though I do think that everyone should know some security, especially with DevSecOps. But there are tools like some of Melissa's previous talks and books and things like that they can refer to, right? And not necessarily have to, go learn everything there is to know about implementing all of this. You can just take pieces from it as you go, I think, and that also will help it not seem as overwhelming for the people who can't just go ahead and have a dedicated team.
I'm loving it because you're answering all the questions before I'm actually asking them. So one of the questions that I received was also related to it, because even from my small experience, that I'm a QA engineer, so I'm not a DevOps nor a DevSecOps expert, but from what I know a lot of tooling related to the static analysis. And I would love to hear from you and your experience, like what are the other tools that can help us, to learn more or to start implementing it.
Yeah, so I want to say, so for the people who are QA engineers, I got interested in security during a bug bash, during a manual test passes. I actually got notified by Facebook. Actually told me about it this morning. I had forgotten. So I was at Bing. We were doing a manual bug bash, which was just, exploratory testing, basically. And somebody had sent me a list of inputs to try, and one of them, I discovered we weren't sanitizing close brackets. Closing parentheses in an input. And I was like, that's weird. I heard something about this thing called cross-site scripting and about injection. I didn't really know. And I was like, but I found something weird. And so I found something weird, and I went, and found a list of potential exploits that I didn't know what they were doing. They were like, copy, use this input string, use this input string. And I just started pasting them in. And at one point, I managed to raise an alert box. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't understand exactly how I got the alert box raised. But for those who don't know, when you're testing sanitization, if you find some unclosed JavaScript, basically, and you can inject, it's alert. A nice way to find out that you've been able to inject JavaScript that's being run is you just type alert, and then an alert box appears, and then you're like, yep, that's for sure a thing. And so the first time I made that happen, I was like, whoa. It was like a light bulb moment for me. But it was just exploring and learning a little bit about something that I went from there into learning how to do, other things, because it was interesting, because I'd made something happen. And that sort of led from there into eventually my fuzzing service, which basically did what I did by hand at scale. Because I realized that by hand, I couldn't possibly go to every single page and every single input box we have and just copy paste in alerts.
And stay sane.
But I could write an automation tool that did. And so that's where the fuzzing service came from. And so I know we're kind of wandered afield from the question at hand, but don't discount that just because you're a QA engineer and you don't understand security today means that you can't do some very basic security testing and maybe gain some expertise for tomorrow.
Yeah. Actually, my story is kind of similar. I found out a tiny chapter about SQL injection in one of the, QA books for beginners when I was starting. And it got me so interested that I was starting, to do SQL injection to every site I knew, just to see how it works. And I actually found one when I could do that. I was so happy.
Yeah, I once actually exposed a real XSS. I made a query on, these was years ago, I made a query on Bing that would post to your Facebook wall. Send you a query on Bing, you would click on it and it would post to your Facebook wall.
Wow.
That's good. That's a good one.
Many years ago, but.
Well, so Melissa, do you have any, I know you probably don't need them now, but when you were starting out, did you have any websites or places that you refer to for testing tools and resources?
Yeah. So I came from a university called Florida Tech, and two of my professors at the university, one was a man named Dr. Kem Kaner, and the other was a man named Dr. James Whitaker, and the third was a man named Dr. Mike Andrews. All three of them are very well known in the field and have books published. Basically, they wrote the books, about testing, about security testing. James and Mike have a book called Testing Application Security. Those are the books that I've used. So if you look for James Whitaker or Mike Andrews' book, they're fantastic books. They're short, but they're concise. Yeah. And they are, they're a little older now because I'm dating myself a little bit. So they're a couple maybe 10 years old, but they're still solid books. I think I have them put away in my closet.
And those also are the big names in the field. You're right. Like, I'm pretty sure that most of us already heard about them.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure most of you know who those people are, but those are who I learned from directly, and those are the books that I really enjoy and have found very useful.
My big suggestion is watch and read and listen to everything Tanya Jenka has done. Yeah. So literally, yeah, I mean, she is DevSecOps Queen 2, aside from Melissa. So yeah, lots of information there on her Twitter, and her company is WeHacks Purple. So they do a lot of specific testing and training for companies as well. So depending on what your budget is, right, you could hire them to train you.
Do they have like a podcast or something like that? Because
and a podcast. Yep.
I was on a podcast.
Actually, you were the first one, right?
I was the first one. Yeah, I was the first one on the podcast. So if you go to shehackspurple.com, she's got her book. She just released a book as well, maybe a month ago. Alice and Bob Learn Application Security or something?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you talk about DevSecOps in that entire podcast, right? So that's definitely a good thing to check out.
And some engineering leadership too. Leadership.
Correct.
Which is also an interesting topic indeed, and it's great that you can talk about anything almost, Melissa.
Very. I talk well about it, but we could certainly talk about it. I spend a lot of my time now hiring, so.
And we have an extra speaker today, right? I'm hearing.
My cat, yes. Yes, she
I heard also a good book suggestion.
Right there. She was meowing the book suggestions that you need to listen to if you're a security cat. Yeah, I can't point to it backwards, but she's there.
Okay, so that was about the books, but any good tooling like for beginning, I don't know, that impressed you the most throughout your careers?
I have a list here. Let me see. I have a list about fuzz testing. So if you're in QA, I think probably the most exciting and easiest place to start is probably fuzz testing. Because it's half automation testing, half security testing. You don't have to know a lot about security in order to do a fuzz test. It runs mostly like an automated test, just a really crazy one. So getting started with maybe Kali. Kali Linux there's a container out of it. You can just go and run a Kali Linux container. It has a lot of tools built in for doing various types of fuzz testing. There's also a lot of tutorials oriented around using Kali Linux because it's a well-known image.
That was going to be my suggestion. There's lots of great things in Kali, and if you're learning, beginning to learn Kali at the same time, right? Just dive into the tools that are already built in. It's so easy.
Yeah, that way you don't have to invent anything or find something or worry about versions. There goes my assistant. Yeah, so probably that would be where I would start it. Go grab a copy of Kali Linux, start up a container, or VM if you're running old school, and play around with it. There's plenty of really good tutorials about here's how you would do, here's how you would do a Wi-Fi scan. Here's how you would run, I forget what's built in on Kali, but there's a couple different fuzzers built in that you can just run the fuzzer, see what happens.
Run the fuzzer. Yeah, and I think, like you said, Leanna, it's becoming, right, like a hot topic now, and like the cool gig to have is get into DevSecOps, which is what I tell everybody. But I think there are more resources than you would assume, just because we're all thinking about it right now. It's been being talked about for a while from people like Melissa. So there's definitely stuff out there. You could just literally do a DevSecOps research.
Yeah, Angela
search and it would bring up a lot
about it earlier this year too. Or
What's
last
that?
year. You said you definitely ran a conference about it. Early last year. It feels like it was just a little bit ago, but I guess it was like 8 months.
The We Are Hackers conference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we had We Are Hackers is an online community for like women and underrepresented genders and individuals who just kind of want their own space to do the thing. And we had a conference in June or July, which was amazing. It was 2 days and it was our first one, but all the resources have since been deleted from YouTube because of the hacking aspect. So I'd refer you there, but I can't.
That's so fun.
Yeah, we're trying to get it back up. Melissa, if you have your video and want to send that to me, please do, but I'm sure you don't because we recorded it. But yeah, we're a community of hackers of all roles who do many different things, but there's a lot of great people on there like Melissa who are happy to reach out and say, this is what I use. So if anybody that's watching wants to join and ask questions on what people have used in the past, we're definitely there to help answer those questions too.
Okay, so is this an online conference that usually happens? Is it annual or it's just spontaneous?
It may be annual, but there's a website I'll just post in the chat.
Okay, thank you. I will share.
Sure. And yeah, it takes you to our website, but basically we're a Slack channel, a community built off of Slack. So everything's virtual, even before COVID.
That's smart, you know?
Yep.
You
Makes
were
it easy.
prepared already. Yeah. Awesome. That's so impressive. Angela, actually, I would love also for you to talk a little bit about your background because Melissa, she had an opportunity to present herself and
Sure.
we know a little about you yet.
Sure. So I guess I would say somewhat the opposite of Melissa and am newer to security and also just work strictly in cybersecurity. So I don't have any of the dev background at all. So I'm here as the person showing the perspective from someone who isn't in the DevSecOps community, but thoroughly supports it and tries to get people to get into it. So if there's anyone with a dev background, I try to emphasize how important security is. And oftentimes they respond with, yeah, we don't have time for you people. And and I'm like, why would you say that to me? I'm working so hard to help you. But I've previously done vulnerability assessments, pen testing, and now I work at Microsoft as a program manager on our Office 365 security, Microsoft Defender security team. So I work a lot with email security, but also I work closely with the engineers and developers. So I do kind of get to see, right, like when things go wrong, how it could have been solved if security was built in a long time ago. But obviously we're able to like work on those things because we have the manpower and woman power, but not every company, right, can do that. So it's funny that you're in QA because I've done a lot of mentoring already in my career, but I have a friend who I'm working with now who is really like gotten himself to a good dev point where he's like, okay, I want to break into being a developer. And I'm like, but what about DevSecOps? And in that conversation, I've kind of started to mention how QA can really lead down that path. So I think it's cool how it all kind of ties together. But yeah, that's pretty much my background in a nutshell.
That's awesome. And yeah, we QAs, we are used to, just ping people and be annoying. So I think that it would be a great also initiative if more QAs also start to dive into the security questions and, we are kind of used to be annoying with everybody.
I'm sure we all annoy someone. I know I definitely annoy a couple of people. My
job is now to annoy an entire organization. I annoy people in math. That's leadership, annoying everybody all the time.
But
at least you're delightful to work with.
But that's the good type of annoyment, right? So it's right. For the good, for the project, for the team, for the learning, for everybody, right?
I tell them that all the time. This is for your own good.
Exactly. I just don't want anybody to misunderstand us. It's like the good thing about it. And how about the metrics? So, sorry. I wanted to ask, like, do you have like any type, like, how usually look like your reports? You probably have them, graphs and metrics. What are types of metrics that you usually can track?
So it depends on the tool, right? Every tool has their own metrics. I don't have a great way of, I haven't unified things like, here's our vulnerable dependency scan. I haven't been able to union that with, like, here's our static analysis results, because they're just two very different tools. They do show up in the same place, right? They show up usually on the PRs. They're just different, like, you just click through between them.
Okay.
But usually the tools have, like, they have the metrics of what they're analyzing, and they'll report it to you directly. So I can look at the dashboard of here's the couple hundred vulnerable packages we have right now, the ones that are of various priority. Versus here's the static analysis errors, especially if you don't start static analysis on a code base from the beginning. There's always that long, if you don't start from the beginning, code isn't clean. And so you can't just clean it with one button push. So it takes time. To not make it worse. And so usually we just try to not make the problem worse. So I can see right now we're trending, in the correct direction for our code smelter. They're not getting worse. Same with code coverage, right? As long as your code coverage isn't getting worse, you're probably okay, regardless of the individual unit test coverage on any specific change. So mostly we just look at the metrics out of the tool, right? Is it going in the right direction? Is it reporting? It's probably reporting something. So you probably can't use it as like a binary pass-fail so much as this is in the right trend.
Yeah. Okay. And so, do you have something to add? Like,
not for that one.
Your perspective, like what you usually can use as to buy people in.
No, not really. I think it's just, it's more about like the process and reevaluating how long it's taking each time, right? Like once you continue to do it and you start building it in faster, then the review process is probably going to go a lot quicker. And it'll get easier as you keep, working on it and making the changes and reviewing.
Yeah, I do want to back up a step though, because there may not be specific metrics to security, but there are metrics that you should be using in general to track the overall effectiveness of your efforts across security and testing and etc. I like to use the DORA metrics. They're published from the DevOps Research and Assessment. It comes from Google. I'll put it in the chat here as well. Basically, your deployment frequency, right? How often you are able to deploy, the lead time for a change, which is from the time a developer gets the work item to what is the time from the time they get the work item to the time it's in production. How long is that? Your change failure rate, which is the number of deployments that ship, a major bug and that either have to be paused or rolled back or have an emergency patch. And the time to restore service, which is how long it takes you to fix everything if something catastrophic happens. And so those 4 metrics are influenced by a lot of things, but especially influenced by your automation efforts, your test automation, your security automation. And so tracking those metrics over time will tell you, you can also add, incidents. What are my high impact incidents that have happened, right? How many sub-zero security incidents, sub-zero outages you've had. Or you can roll those into your change failure rate, I guess. So tracking those will help you track the overall effectiveness of your efforts, right? Because if you are having, you're able to deploy every day, but you're having a 50% change failure rate, you almost assuredly have a quality problem, whether that's a security testing problem or a, regression testing problem. You assuredly have a quality problem. And so as you invest in automation efforts, that change failure rate had better go down, or else you're probably not investing your automation in the right place.
Yeah, right. So tons of very useful tips and links as well. Thank you for sharing. And I think we don't have more questions here in the chat. So thank you to both of you. It was super amazing to finally meet you and talk to you face to face. I'm very, very honored to have such a great guests with tons of experience and knowledge, even like in different perspectives. So Melissa and Angela, you work like in different sides of the coin, but that's super amazing. Thank you very much for joining tonight. For us, it's evening. This morning for you. And thank you for everything that you shared. I will share also the links with people in the description of this video. And this video will be available on YouTube for more people learn from you as well.
Yeah, thanks a ton, Lena. Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.